heart's still.
Oh, wait, what did I do? I didn't do the thing that I normally do.
It's direct live. Hey, hi, everybody.
There's no countdown whatsoever.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Go. Hey, everyone.
Well, so we should be preambling because they may not have joined us yet.
And this is the part of the show where I say, thank you for joining us for this week's broadcast of This Week in Science. Justin and I are here right now. Blair is doing battle with a washing machine, and hopefully will join us. She has some great stories for the Animal Corner. In this first part of the show, as you know, I tell you that if there is anything that needs to be edited out, like then our wonderful editor Rachel will take care of that for the podcast version. But this is it. That's it. This is our show.
If this is the first time you're listening to this version of the show, be warned, Kiki curses constantly.
I do not.
You never hear it. You never hear it in the recorded version because all of that is edited out.
Yeah, it's here. No, I try to be family friendly. Every once in a while it changes. So we're going to talk about science. If you can hit on the shares and the likes and all the things to get us in the algorithms for Right Now Live, that would be wonderful. And you ready to get going, Justin?
Yeah, always.
Everybody out there ready to get going? You happy? Let's be happy, everyone. Here we go. All right, we are starting this show in 3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 1013, recorded on Wednesday, April 30th, 2025. When is a power grid a metaphor? Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight we will fill your head with dismantling dead insects and screaming trees. But first,
disclaimer. There are some really interesting things happening in the world of science. Discoveries that could change everything for the better, or point out dangers before they change everything for the worse. But the critical findings in research are currently in jeopardy of being silenced. Anti-science political actions are dismantling research in America. To the far right, everything is part of a left-wing agenda, including vaccines, research, science, basic math, and even Muppets. It is unclear if American science will survive the next few years. There is a real and frightening danger of that we might not be just going to lose our place as global leaders in research, but that it might be replaced by something far worse. Agenda-driven, fake research will certainly be next, put forward as if it was actual science. When the time comes, and it will be coming soon, unfortunately, we will be holding the line here between the world of biased beliefs and This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki.
And a good science to you too, Justin, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We are back again for our Wednesday night broadcast. If you're listening to us on the podcast, it's wherever, whenever you are. Woohoo! But it's a happy day of science. Yeah.
Look at you, future traveler.
I see you there. Thanks for being here. Yeah, thanks for bringing us into your life. And we do have a good show ahead. At some point, maybe Blair will be joining us. We will see. On On tonight's show, I have stories about screaming trees. They're so loud. And it really may answer that philosophical question. I don't know. Beer beginnings and jump-starting a power grid. What do you have, Justin?
I've got bird flu bovines, antibiotic microbiota resistance, trouble at the NIH, and more trouble at a place called the National Institute of Health.
Why are you always gotta be bringing trouble? Just bringing the trouble.
I'm bringing the science news, and I wish I was talking about something else. Believe me.
Oh, I know. I do know. And Blair has some stories for the Animal Corner, but if she's not going to join us, I don't want to tease them for you. So, right now I'm just teasing that Blair might be here. It depends on her washing machine.
So she got attacked. Attacked by a washing machine. It happens more often than people like to imagine. Yeah.
She's got mops, doing battle, rolling her 18-sided die. I don't know. As we jump into the show here, I want to remind you all that subscribing to the TWIS podcast on your favorite podcast platform is super easy. You look for This Week in Science and hit subscribe, woohoo, or follow, or whatever it is. We're also on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, and we broadcast every Wednesday evening in Pacific Standard Time at 8 p.m.-ish, around about. For those who watch live, you got to be patient sometimes. But anyway, if you subscribe, hit the notifications, you will be notified every new time a new episode is published or live. And if you just want to know more, story links, etc., go to twist.org. That's where you go. Now it's time for the science. You ready?
Bring it.
Okay. You know what a blackout is, right?
So it's when you've had probably two, maybe three too many, and then you wake up and you're like in a different country, and you're like, what happened? You can't quite piece it all together until you
Las Vegas minus some kidneys, bathtub ice, etc. That was an old internet thing. Anyhow, not that kind of blackout.
That was
Justin.
Before the internet, Kiki. Come on now.
It was, I know. So power grid blackout. Usually when we're talking about a power grid blackout, it's local, right? And you always wonder, you're like, why is it taking so long to get the power back on? And when we talk about a grid, do you really think of the power supply as a grid? Do you think of it as having different nodes where different lines connect and move outward and inward and supply and allow the flow of electrons? Do you think of it as a grid with intersecting points?
I think I think of it more as like a tree, like a branching thing. But that might just be.
I guess you could. Yeah, I see what you're saying there.
That's because I'm rural, though. I think like in a big city, yes, I can picture it as a grid, block by block. Where I'm at, it's more like, line goes out that way, branches off a little bit, and then there's nobody beyond that, so why keep going?
So there are issues with just getting the local power grid. Look, sometimes it is a very localized power outage because of a transformer that blew. Maybe a substation had issues, and that created a larger power issue. Maybe you have issues that cascade through the grid and lead to much larger scale power outages, like the one that occurred in the Iberian Peninsula this last week. On April 28th, Spain and Portugal were in the dark. They just plunged into darkness. They had cell phone, the infrastructure, your internet maybe worked, because if that doesn't need a power supply, you're doing great. But about 60% of the region's electricity was cut off in seconds. So nobody knows exactly what happened. A lot of people have come out and been like, "Oh, it's solar panels and sustainable energy because it's."
Those are the only people whose lights didn't go out. Are you kidding me?
I know, exactly. No, everybody's did, but the reality is it's not renewables that are at fault. Renewables had nothing to do with it. And one of the key hypotheses, prominent hypotheses right now, is that it had to do with a fluctuation, a vibration that in the lines in the transport infrastructure that leads to the parts of the power grid becoming out of phase. And when different parts of the power grid become out of phase, they don't talk to each other and they cause destructive or constructive interference. And so you can have the blowing of more transformers because they get overloaded, capacitors blow. You can have the destructive interference, which just knocks everything out because it doesn't work well together. The interesting thing about your electrical grid, and one of the key issues with Powerwall batteries and having solar panels on your house that you can push back out into the grid, is the complexity of phase matching. So the frequency and phase of the electrical signal that's coming in, the power that's coming in, has to be matched by your system going out. And this is a small issue locally, but it is the managing principle for the power grid. And so when fluctuations occur at a large scale, if you don't have redundancy and resiliency in the system, it can all go out. Now, but just start it back up again, right? Don't we have these power plants, and don't we have renewables, and don't we have all these systems that are there producing electrons? They're going to put electrons back in the system. And this is where a black start comes into play. The majority of all of the sources of energy that come into our electron transport infrastructure need power to start. And if they have had to stop because what they're pushing into is disrupted and they're not supplying anymore, all of our power power producing plants, they shut off and they turn off when the need or the demand goes away. So when the grid goes out, all of the plants shut off. We have peaker plants and we have other things that can, ramp up fairly quickly, but nuclear plants, transmission for just about everything it needs energy to start. Hydroelectric plants don't need as much energy to get going. They only need modest power. Maybe battery systems or diesel engines can get them started. And so they can move very quickly. Potential energy in dams, right? The water in dams, you can have instant generation. And so this is great. But if you don't have those as part of your grid supply, then that's not going to work. So a lot of turbines, a lot of things, they need external energy to get moving. And so part of restoring power to Spain and Portugal and the huge grid that was affecting so many people relied on not just turning them on. You don't just turn the power on, because remember what I said about phase matching? If you just turn everything on all at once, they're just going to crash into each other again. So you have to slowly ramp up energy going into the system and not have different areas of the grid that are independently controlled, competing with each other and not collaborating, not coordinating. So there needs to be an overarching coordination that takes place. And so they were able to restore 99% of their loads overnight in Spain. Portugal had a complete restoration overnight. But that timeline was because, and the time it took, the fact that it couldn't happen immediately, is that they had black start resources. They had ways to get the energy producers and suppliers back on a line very quickly. So anyway, I think this kind of falls in line with last week's conversation about, not just the carbon capture aspect of it, but figuring out how to create resiliency and redundancy in these systems so that regionally, so that for an entire country, an entire peninsula, you can supply people with energy when and where they need it. Anyway, the interconnectedness of it is one of the things that I think is something that people don't.
And if you've got the capacity, get a couple of solar panels, get a lithium ion phosphate battery. Do it quick, because everything is made in another country with a lot of tariffs. Because you can withstand.
Yeah.
Like I was like 90% of solar panels
come from China.
And
I know there's a lot of those,
maybe a higher percentage of the batteries.
Yes.
I think the United States has like 4% of that market currently. Largely due to the you could say the rare earth minerals, but it's also like we could have made that a thing that we did long before. But no, there was for some reason there was resistance within the United States against renewable energy that prevented us from being the innovators on that one. So anyway, the point is
20 years ago there was a major investment in renewables in the United States, and it is paying off in spades. We have massive solar, wind, hydro. There is great stuff happening in the United States. Up to now.
My point is, it sounds like you really need a battery backup of 1 or 2 days for if it's
a
one of
natural
these entire
gas
grids.
backup. Yeah, you need some kind of backup.
Generator, whatever it is. Get you, start thinking like it's the end times. Hey, this is a great time to mention our sponsor. End Times Gear, where you can get all of your end times stuff for when the time is ending.
They'll even throw in Dr. Kiki branded wine, because I whine so much.
Make sure you stock up on wine. What else lasts a long time? Rice. And have plenty of water. That's like every emergency kit. They're always telling you have 10 gallons of water in case there's a earthquake or I guess not for a flood. They probably don't recommend it in that one. But
unless
on everything
you don't
else.
Live on Greenland on the ice
Well, actually,
sheet.
even in a flood, because then your water supply might be tainted. If not that you're in the flood, but anyway, it's always good to be prepared.
It is. Yeah. Eric Knapp says he got very familiar with load shedding from the power company this last winter. So a lot of the issues related to, why do we have brownouts and planned times of day when you're not going to have energy. Just be ready for that. There's this grid-based balancing that energy companies have to do to keep the grid going. But at the same time, there's also, if it's not a public good, then there's also profit involved in it that may lead to certain decisions about when brownouts occur and who is browned out and where the energy is coming from. And yes. Oh, Eric Knapp, this just is right along. I think we should look to the Fearmongers shop for all of our phobia needs. I think that'd be great.
The Fearmonger shop for all of your phobia needs. That's a great fake sponsor.
So good. All right, everybody. If you're interested, I'm going to put the link to this really good story from Clean Technica that explained a lot of this. But it is something that is very important for the grid, for how the grid is maintained, and also as we start, creating small grids, local grids, independent, or even pushing back out into the grid. All these things need to be taken into account. We don't really think about them all the time. Justin.
Yeah.
You want to talk about really, really amazing, great secret surprise news that you found this last week? So cool. I love secrets. It's so good.
Super secret.
So good.
You're talking about the hidden transmission of avian influenza virus, H5N1.
That doesn't
Texas
sound good.
Dairy cattle.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Actually, we reported on this a year ago. But this is scientists of the United States Department of Agriculture's National Animal Disease Center, along with multiple academic, state, and federal collaborators, have identified the emergence of interstate spread of the highly pathogenic avian influenza A H5N1 in dairy cattle. So genetic analysis confirms that a reassortment event happened in wild birds and that then somehow made its way into cattle. This is...
So we talked about this a while back. It made its way into cattle through various methods, but what's different now? Like, is it just because it is cross-state? Is it the interstate spread and it's getting more?
Yeah. So this is...
And we're not monitoring it?
Well, okay. So the monitoring was an issue we were talking about a year ago. And the monitoring part of it, we will also get to here a little bit at the end of this story. But it is largely up to the cattle owners. And if they find a sick cow, dairy cow, or beef cattle, what have you, they're not allowed to transport it across the state line. That's a law that we already have.
Okay.
The best way to avoid that is not to test your animals.
Right.
And so there's very little testing, because as soon as you find, you got a cow with the flu, now you got to determine whether or not you can ship. And so this has been part of the problem. It almost would be worth making that declaration, but then being able to, if both parties, whatever. Like, what we want is transparency here. But the way the system is designed, we're not getting transparency out of the cattle owners, because they're the ones who are pretty much up to them whether or not they're going to test the cattle for the things. What this report is saying is something a little bit interesting, to the point where I'm not sure how much I believe it. But it's stating that the emergence basically came from non-symptomatic animals. That they think that the even asymptomatic or not obviously sick animals were getting transported for months and months and months before they made found the first confirmed case. Now, that's the reason I'm like, I don't know if I believe it, the asymptomatic, because they're saying cattle that weren't tested a year ago were asymptomatic. I don't know why you say that, other than you just trust that no cattleman would have shipped a cow that was sick because they would have checked them all first. And that's not reality. So that's why I'm like, I get that.
There's also, if there's
that's
also
how it should have gone.
Yeah, there's also the scenario where there is observance of symptomatic cows and realizing the other cows that are around that cow and shipping them out as fast as possible. After you know that one is sick.
Yeah, and that's why
the test. Yeah.
And that's why I have a little bit of back of my mind, I don't know how you could come up with that assertion. But what they did do is they did genotyping of this flu that's now in I think 8 different states or more, or at least this was the initial outbreak. And they say it all looks like they all came from Texas, and it's all the same version of the virus. So this is how they've backtracked it to Texas. Texas also, we have the first human case of transmission. That person had a slight alteration, one basically gene difference in their version that allowed them to be infected, likely from a surface, like a skin contact kind of a thing. But they haven't seen that repeated elsewhere. And it's different. That slight variation isn't what is being predominantly seen in these cattle. So they don't think it's made that jump yet, even though it seems to have in a one-off instance. Okay. But we do also know that it is now, there's transmission has gone from cattle into poultry, raccoons, cats, wild birds, blackbirds, pigeons, all kinds of birds. And the cats, of course, they think are troubling because the cats are very likely a vector. The cattle are a vector. Actually, any of the mammals are an especially, like raccoons even, especially frightening mammal because it shows that one step closer to humans that should just, not be that big of a leap. Now, they're not saying that the leap has taken place yet. But the conclusion is viruses circulating in cattle represent a potential pandemic threat, given the evidence of cattle to human transmission events. Monitoring of cattle and other agriculture animals is essential for early warning and risk assessment. The findings stress the need for testing cattle before interstate movement and a national milk testing strategy as well.
Addition to this last week, I believe there were regulations or changes in place to reduce the monitoring of disease in poultry farms. So if chicken and turkey, which are H5N1 vectors, if they and cows are not being tested and monitored, then the whole system allows for this unmonitored spread. Secrets. Yay.
But again,
surprise.
I don't feel, we're this is why a federal government, by the way, is one of those things that you really like to have around. Just for anybody who is like, what do we need it for? This is one of the things that they could be doing is doing this cattle monitoring.
We had departments for that. Blair's here, but go ahead.
I don't believe it's going to be on the table with any sort of. In fact, the less we test, the less sick cows we find, the less cases we have. There we go.
We've learned this before. We know how this works.
Yeah, but it's like I'm at the point where I feel like this is the sequel, but the plot stayed the same.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the 60 Minutes interview with the veterinarian who we reported on her work that basically opened up this whole H5N1 spread in Texas, she was interviewed on 60 Minutes, and she sits there with this look in her eyes, and she's like, it's bad. There's a clip on John, what's his name, who does that show.
So she was not working for the government, as I recall. She might have been working for a county or something, but she was a veterinarian who's had been assigned cattle, was working to just monitor cattle health in general for some groups, and then found this thing that couldn't be identified, sent it off to the university, and discovered that there was a bird flu outbreak in cattle in Texas, and nobody wanted it to be real.
Yeah. But she was, as a veterinarian, she was there, boots on the ground, going and talking to people, seeing people there, having stories. So she was able to do the work on her own that agencies had not picked up. And, that's not okay, everybody.
But the sequel should have a different plot.
Ending?
Different writers?
No ending. I don't want an ending. Is bad.
You can't just give the same movie a different time. Oh, but it's all different, and this time it's a different flu. It's not.
Haven't you? What Fast and Furious 23? Like how many?
I've never. Can I tell you? I've never seen one. I've never seen one of those movies.
You're missing out. There is some great.
Am
driving.
I?
Yeah.
Am I?
Like if you like cars going fast, it's really good. I don't know. I mean, for that, I don't know. Fast cars go wee.
Because it feels like if you made the movie about anything else, it'd be like, oh, hey, it's a skateboard movie, and now everything has to happen on a skateboard. I'm just like, is that the point? Is that everything happens on a skateboard or everything is in a car? Like
both. You have to have both. Yes. All right. From bird flu to blonde beer. Let's move along. Blair, you're not going to tell your zoo story? You want to jump in with a story?
Oh, I can super quick.
How you doing? This is not blonde beer.
With Blair.
This is zoo.
I mean, nothing's as it should be. Let's just move on. Okay.
Okay.
Hey, orangutans in zoos, they do more object exploration and are just generally more kind of interested in their environment and do more interacting with their environment than they do in the wild. This was 12,000 instances of daily exploratory object manipulation, EOM as they call it in behavioral laboratories. And they looked at 51 orangutans aged 6 months to 76 years.
Whoa.
And they found that orangutans living in zoos engage in more frequent, more diverse, and more complex exploration than their wild counterparts. So, of course, there's the question of, like, how it's being measured. Is just interacting with the wild environment, does that count as exploration? Probably not. So, like, is there just more to do in the wild? Or are they less stressed because they don't think they're going to be attacked by a large carnivore at any moment, and therefore they can play? It could be both. It could be neither. I don't know.
I'm reading a Terry Pratchett book right now, and there's an orangutan, or the orangutan who was a wizard, but now he's a librarian. And Terry Pratchett's description is like, oh, it's a short, stocky person, furry person with long arms. Orangutans have been like on the forefront of this kind of cognitive stuff, play, etc., in the wild, and I think they're smart. They play.
I wonder if this has to do with something we've talked about on the show before, which is the stress and mental requirement of poverty, where you're so your every effort has to be invested in survival. And so the long-term thinking can kind of go away. The playful thoughts, whatever it is, sitting down and watching This Week in Science for an hour and a half might be something that you can't afford because you got to keep the hustle up to survive. And I'm wondering if that's what's going on. I think you mentioned it in there in the beginning.
Yeah, so this is how I used to talk about zoo animals in, accredited zoos where they take good care of their animals. It's research-based, all that good stuff. All the various asterisks and caveats on that. But a good zoo is less like a prison, and it's more like an all-expenses-paid resort.
Yeah.
You have your buffet of healthy foods. You have on-call medical staff. Your entire exhibit gets changed out every day with your favorite things to play with.
I would sign up for the human zoo.
Absolutely. So I think that that's part of it that people don't always understand. And I mean, I can speak to this right now, especially in the early days of, having a newborn, when you're just literally trying to survive from moment to moment. You're not doing anything fun. You are surviving, right? Like, before you get into that state, you might, play a video game, read a book, watch a movie, go for a walk. You can't do any of that when you're in survival mode, right? So, I mean, there's the question of whether the play that they're experiencing, that they're doing is replacing something that they would do in the wild, or if they just didn't have the capacity to do it in the wild before, right? And so, like, that's something that also people who take care of animals in captivity have to kind of cope with all the time, is what does my animal want to explore and play with versus what elicits a natural response, right? So a great example for that would be, I used to take care of an Andean condor who I would take paper boxes and I'd crumple up newspaper in them, cardboard boxes. I'd crumple up newspaper in them, and then I'd hide little chunks of meat throughout that, and I'd poke some holes. And so by doing that, I had the condor had to kind of stick his head into the holes and rip and stick and rip and stick and rip, which was exactly a natural response that he would do to rip at a carcass. However, his favorite thing to do in the whole world was cuddle with stuffed animals.
Oh.
Not a natural response, right?
No, but that's adorable.
he would take the giant, like, huge Costco stuffed animals, like the ones that are like 3 or 4 feet long. He'd stomp, and then like settle down with them and rub his head all over them, and it was very cute. So my point is, there's place for both, there's reason for both, but when you're looking at what you want to call play or exploration or learning or any of the different kind of buckets that we put animal behavior into, they're not a monolith. Their behavior is not a monolith, right? So like, there could be a million reasons that these orangutans are doing this more in zoos versus in the wild. But
what I do,
if
like,
nothing
is
else, I would say they're not stressed. Is what I would take out
No
of
predators. You actually don't have to worry too much about food collection, right? Because it's provided without too many tricks.
Yeah. Yep. And the zookeepers are always going to make sure everyone gets what they need to eat, even if there is a bully. They check it out.
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But this one graph, and the way that it's the way that the data is distributed, shows that the zoo animals are much more exploratory for longer, early. Like, there's more early in their development. We know playfulness is usually like a youthful thing for animals. Humans, everyone, we're animals. But the fact that these separate tracks, how they work out, the age that is not different, but it's the amount at the age. So the younger zoo animals are more able to play. Parents are less stressed. Everything's working. I can see everything you're saying here. It's all correlation, though. Who knows? Yeah, maybe
it is all correlation, and also there aren't any plastic puzzle toys in the wild, so there's not an exact relationship to what you're observing, but it's still very interesting food for thought.
Yeah. Speaking of food for thought, beer. Let's get into this story that I think is super fun. In PLOS One, a study was just published related to blonde beer. Blonde beer is yummy. It's tasty. It's very, I don't know. It's easy to drink. It's not like an IPA or others. Their analysis, these researchers were looking at the yeast that are used to ferment the beer and when it was used. Their samples were from these ceramic vessels. The yeast that was still kind of there, stuck in the walls of the vessels. Samples were between 920 and 750 years before now, from the Melanquina Lake site in northwest Argentine, Patagonia. And so the fact that they're finding the exact same fermentation yeast 920, 750 years before now, and we know that the blonde beer yeast is from old world. Blonde beers are lagers that got started in the 16th century Bavaria. And so the question is, how and when did this particular strain of yeast, Saccharomyces eubayanus, when did it make the trip to Patagonia? How did it get there? And who started the beer making? Were they already fermenting and making beer on their own? And it was like, hey, the Spanish brought their own stuff or whatever. But what it suggests is that this is an early Spanish explorer route of trade that took these yeast from Europe to South America. Kind of cool. Justin, your face. What are you? What's happening?
Yeah.
Justin, your face. That's a good one.
I'm just looking. He's like really working through this thing.
No, it's just really fascinating. But I'm trying to picture who this brewer was that was like, oh, I'm gonna go with these fellas across the ocean. I gotta make sure I bring my brewing kit. What's that? Oh, it's just a bioreactor full of yeast. Don't worry about it. Just don't bother with it. Just leave it be. It's just pretty wild.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a fascinating, different bit of evidence and a path of evidence for ideas of like how trade occurred and when trade occurred and how influences on not just culture, but also the spread of yeast and like different species around the world, how and when that occurred.
But this is going the other way though. This is originating in Argentina and finding its way back to Bavaria.
No. It was originating in Bavaria and went to Argentina.
Huh.
Yes.
Okay.
So they found this yeast that's a Bavarian strain in ceramic vessels from 900 years ago in Patagonia. But the pottery is supposedly pre-Hispanic, Northwest Patagonia. So that is the thing, is that it's supposedly pre-Spanish exploration trade, but how did Bavarian yeast get there?
Hang on.
It was carried.
It was carried. Who carried it?
I gotta pause it. This is because the report the link you've got in there is saying it's going the other way. The story that's written on it. Now, this might not be this isn't the study I'm looking at. I'm looking at a story on the study, so gosh knows. And that's why my face was slightly twisted.
But yeah, so maybe it did go the other way, but the question it
says according to a recent study in Plus One identifies residues on pottery from the cool, misty mountains of Argentina that would place the yeast in Patagonia at least 400 years before its first appearance in Europe.
Right. And so, okay, you're right. I misread it, and I got it. Thank you for doing that.
So the Spanish explorer, was there a Bavarian gentleman? Or were there like brewers like searching the world for that rare strain of yeast way back when?
Yeah, so it's the strain migrated to Europe, hybridized with old world strains, making the blonde beers or lagers in 16th century Bavaria. But then you have these like other things. Yeah. Anyway.
The transfer of yeast may have happened like a sourdough starter, is what it says.
Everybody likes beer, is basically what this means. No.
Of course. It's the only way to drink dirty water, honestly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's where it came from. How do we drink this disgusting, dirty water without getting sick? Oh, well, we're here.
So there's a very
coffee and everything else. Yeah.
There's a very long tradition of alcohol use, as well as some hallucinogenics, on a state level throughout South America, where the way that ruling empires would sort of set up control would be to basically throw parties. Mm-hmm. They would throw parties because when you're the empire, when you're the one in charge of a very large region, you can go find that hallucinogenic berry there, and you got your brewers over here with this yeast, and you got these hops growers or whoever on the other side of the mountain. You have control over the whole thing. And so the way that they impressed upon the different micro groups is that they would throw these parties where they would bring all the fun stuff from all around the region. And so, because it was like, they found all these outposts, and it's like, oh, these are like the military headquarters. But instead, what they find was like residue from hallucinogenic berries and cups that had these residues of alcohol in them. And it's like, oh, they went around throwing parties to get the loyalty of the locals, which I think is that's the way to do it, right? Way better.
From the discussion of this paper, final statement, the strain could have circulated as a contamination of containers that contained fermented native drinks, but these same drinks could also have been part of the rations of the conquerors for consumption during the sea voyage or in their place of origin, among other exotic goods that circulated from America to Europe. So, hey, Bavaria, thank Patagonia for your blonde beer.
Yes. And potatoes.
So, Justin, I'm going to put your next story on the table because I would love Blair to get to the animal corner because she's having a night, and so she's going to animal corner us, and we're going to go.
Blair's Animal Corner, Blair.
And just a moment before we go there.
I was trying to speed it up. That way we don't have to sit wait through the.
I'm speeding it up. This is my speeding it up. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for This Week in Science. We're here weekly talking about science news, doing the best we can in this world to keep the science fires burning. If you love science and you enjoy This Week in Science, please share us with your friends. Make sure that you help subscribe people to our podcast. Don't be the only one. And if you are interested in helping us maintain what we're doing, go to twis.org. You can find stories, show notes, etc. there for all of our episodes. And you can also find links to our Zazzle store, where you can get merchandise, a lot of Blair stuff, which is awesome, Animal Corner goods, which are great, and also our Patreon community. And through both of those, you can support us in ways that allow us to financially be viable, to pay Rachel for editing and stuff like that, which is pretty awesome. So everyone out there, we appreciate your support. We need your support. But more than anything, we really, really appreciate that you're here with us. Thank you for your support. All righty. Now it's time to come back in this sped up format. It's not really sped up. It's actually still very slow. With that wonderful part of the show that you know and love, Blair's Animal Corner with Blair.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. You want to hear about animals? She's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
Thank you. I can't start without that. That's how you summoned me.
I know. I was waiting for Justin.
Hey, remember how we talked about how some spiders are cooperative? And remember how we talked about within those cooperative groups, spiders had distinct personalities?
Yeah, it was wonderful and slightly terrifying.
Yeah. Nah.
No, what?
University of Portsmouth has revealed that African social spiders, who are dubbed hippie spiders for their cooperative lifestyle, may not have distinct personalities at all. Which, it's very funny because the photo that they've chosen for this article is a picture of this particular spider, Stegodyphus dumicola, which are the social hippie spiders, with individuals painted with what I assume is nail polish so that you can tell them apart. So you can track kind of their different... Yes, they look like... Thank you. I was like, oh man, hippie spiders. Yes, 100%. And that has to be on purpose, right? I assume. Like, these are tie-dye colors. They didn't have to do this. Anyway, I think this appears to be just one of those typical situations where they did a study, they were done with their study, they published their study, and then somebody went back and said, but what about more? So researchers monitored 28 social spider colonies. So not 28 spiders, 28 colonies. Every 2 weeks over 4 months, and they measured 3 key behavioral traits: boldness and fleeing responses when perceiving a threat, and prey capture speed in a group setting. So boldness, fleeing, prey capture speed. They found that while individual spiders initially displayed consistent behaviors over short periods, patterns changed over time. So when you add that pesky variable time, the theory that they had different jobs, like in a beehive or an ant nest, starts to fall apart. And in fact, whatever their initial behavior was at the start of the study did not predict how they would act later in life. So this idea that like you had your nurse spiders and your hunting spiders and all these spiders with different jobs, over time, it all started to even out. So whether they have true personalities at all, questionable. Their behavior fluctuates so much that it would be misleading to classify them as having stable personality traits. So this directly challenges past studies that assumed that these personality traits are fixed, and that it turns out those studies were done only over a few days, or behavioral tests were repeated only a small number of times.
That's not the best.
No. So at first I was like, oh, they were only doing months. They should have been doing years. No, days to months. It's not even like, oh, well, you know, the person's PhD program ended and they published and they graduated and they stopped studying the spiders. No, days. Hey.
These spiders live long. These aren't like,
yeah,
I only live for a day fruit flies.
Right. No,
these
they live for years.
That have,
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's, you know, they're cooperative. They help each other. They are social. They depend on each other, but they do not have these specific jobs that, you know.
They're not like ants.
Yes, exactly. They're not like ants or bees. They don't have their specific tasks. So, of course, this challenges the idea that individual personalities drive evolutionary and ecological outcomes in the species, because the assumption was you are a hunting spider in this colony because that was what was advantageous for you, because that's what you're the best at. You know, like the same kind of selective pressures that happen in other cases. Certain genes end up kind of shoehorning into specific roles. Nope. Seems like that has nothing to do with it. And so this has, of course, implications for future behavioral ecology research. So the paper in particular calls on scientists to design more rigorous studies to track behavior over longer periods, rather than relying on short-term observations. And
if you write your paper and say this thing, say, well, we only, you know, like really be like, this is pilot. We only looked at it for 24 hours.
Yeah. And of course, one of the authors say, so much like people, you can't judge a spider on first impressions, and they're not a fan of labels.
Perfect. I love it.
So, anywho, cooperative spiders still terrifying, just in a different way, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it's going to be a very interesting addition to how this research is done, because we keep seeing over and over again a lot of insect spider studies, et cetera. A lot of this stuff is non-reproducible. And
I saw that study this week.
Yeah.
Or it wasn't a study, it was an article, but yeah. It's basically the long and short of it is that some researchers posit that about 40% of behavioral studies done on insects are not reproducible. Now, the reason I didn't fully bring that story and dig down deep into it is it's complicated, because they tried to test the reproducibility of behavioral studies, which in and of itself is like a game of telephone, right? They took now I have to find the link. They took 3 species. They were like, let's try to reproduce these studies on these 3 species, but they really only tested 3 species on one variable on each of them, and was like, hey, is this working? And based on that, decided that only 60% of insect behavioral studies are accurate. So I really wanted, if I was going to bring that tonight, I wanted to like dig into the math, because I'm like, how does that, that part doesn't connect for me, that those methods lead to the conclusion that they drew and the numbers that they picked. And so I wanted to.
And isn't it also potentially like reproducing the problem with the potential, which is small sample sizes, short-term experiments, not looking like you're like, I pick 3 to represent everything.
Yes, that's exact. I was like, this is an Ouroboros of a study. It's like a snake eating its own tail of like bad science. I don't know. That's ultimately why I didn't choose that as like the main thing I wanted to talk about tonight. I got really excited to talk about it and went, this is complicated.
In a way,
actually.
though, doesn't that prove its point? Like, isn't it pretty performative? Like, in a way,
if you use
it's sort of like, I'm going to do the thing that is the problem to show the different results so you can see it's a problem.
Oh, just exactly like what they did with the big psychology study that was like, hey, and then their study had bad methods and had to be retracted.
And that's like saying this bowling ball, it's impossible to pick it up. Nobody can pick it up. And then you try to pick it up with your feet and you can't pick it up with your feet. And your feet are covered in oil. You went, it's impossible. Nobody can pick it up.
That's a very specific scenario for somebody who I know has several bowling trophies. And so I'm now wondering if there was some sort of side bet that took place.
No.
Yeah, that's...
Anyway, that's not the story I brought. Can I bring you?
No,
can I tell you about my other story?
But I'm just saying that this study and how it's like adding to what we understand about the original study is very important. But hopefully, it's also one study, and so hopefully, what will happen is there will be further studies, and that it will, enhance the area, enhance the field. Data will increase, and that it's not just going to be 2 studies battling it out, for primacy.
Right. Well, and one of the things I did take away from that other one that we're not talking about is that there's a lot of standardization on the behavioral studies of mammals. Lots of standardization, lots of understanding of what makes for good science in behavioral studies of mammals. There is really not a lot of that for insects. And so that is part of the issue is, did they say a few days is okay? If everybody kind of gets together and says, okay, for behavioral studies on invertebrates, we need at least 4 months of data, then that can kind of be the consensus amongst the experts in the field, right? But nobody's done that as far as I can tell. Yeah. And so that's part of the problem with the reproducibility. But
the other part is that we don't know enough about their culture. Like
spider culture?
Well, I mean, is behavior completely innate? Or is it like you go over to the other anthill and they're like, yeah, we do things a little different around here. The first anthill you were at. It's just that
I think that's why it's so important they studied, 28 different colonies? Yeah. And so they saw the same trends amongst all those different colonies. But you're right, the specific the behavior that was seen. So this study in particular didn't care as much about what behavior was happening. They cared about who was doing what.
I feel like, though, this just tells us that spiders are not ants. That spiders don't have roles. Like, they're communal, but they're not. They're not like a hive.
Because they... So ants...
Spiders can change. They can learn.
What are they? I'm trying to pull at my insect zoo knowledge. Hymenoptera, whatever ants are, like all of those kind of colonial insects have lots of evolutionary past of being colonial and being specialized and having this deep reliance on one another to survive. Spider family tree. Most spiders are on their own. They do their own hunting. They do their own finding a mate. They do their own protection. They do their own building. They do everything on their own. And so where some might end up evolving to be in a colonial group or be in I might not even call it that, like a community, like a spider community. There are evolutionary benefits to them clumping. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are wholly reliant on one another in the same way that other colonial insects might be, right? So it
We
is
should take
different.
lessons. Yeah, we should. It's like studying these spiders could help us understand ourselves.
Oh, interesting.
Like maybe the reason they're in the community is because it's hard to find a mate when you live way out in the rurals.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Blair, your next story though is I came across it earlier this week, and I love this. Please.
Yes,
Go.
a carnivorous bone collector caterpillar dresses in the remains of its prey.
I love it.
This is a new type of caterpillar that was recently found in Hawaii on the island of Oahu. It creeps along spider webs, it feeds on trapped insects, and then it decorates its silk case with the body parts of the insects it just ate. So there are a lot of meat-eating caterpillars, many in Hawaii, it turns out. Some of them are, cannibals, I guess. They eat each other, sure. And some of them in Hawaii use silk glands to spin protective cases that have lichen all over them. This is the first time that they have seen a caterpillar use ant heads, fly wings, and other remnants of their previous prey to adorn their bodies. So they think this is most likely camouflage, that it allows the caterpillar to eat and then continue to kind of wriggle through the spider's web without being noticed, which I think is very funny to picture. Like, nothing to see here.
They live in a spider's web. Like, they are there going, don't look at me, spider. I'm just taking advantage of what you've got going on here. Like, what a strategy.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely... Oh, it's so great. Okay, so, and as far as they can tell, these guys date back at least 6 million years. So they're actually more ancient than the Hawaiian Islands. But we just found them.
Whoa.
We just found them.
But they only live in it's this one species and in a very small area of land.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So, Dan Rubinoff with the University of Hawaii at Manoa says there really is a concern that we need to do better with conservation, which I think is like, oh snap, we found another species we've never seen its behavior before. It's on this one little island. It's been here for millions of years. Oopsie.
Understatement.
Yeah. So I love it. I also love it because it immediately made me think of Pokemon.
I did not think of
Pokemon. I know nothing about.
I'm learning. I'm currently undergoing some Pokemon education. So, recently learned all about Cubone. He wears the skull of his mother on his head.
Oh my gosh.
What?
There you go. You heard it right.
But I love
yeah.
The specialized adaptation. Like, how did this come? Other species do this, right? Like, there are other species of insects that have this kind of adornment, and so this is a convergent
or they have
evolution.
like, they might have part of their exoskeleton that looks like something else, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But the idea that these little caterpillars are like, I'm a moth, wee, blah, 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 butterfly. And they fly around and they're like, I'm going to land on that spider, that place that a spider might build a web. And then a spider builds a web and they're like, thank you. And then their eggs are like caterpillars. And the caterpillars are like killing spider prey or eating extra spider prey and then going, hey, thanks for the exoskeleton. Like, it's Mad Max. I don't know.
So next time you read The Very Hungry Caterpillar,
no.
Think about, instead of all those delicious fruits and vegetables, they're eating insects. Okay. And then every time he eats his way through things, he adorns himself with pieces of their bodies.
Thank goodness most of it is like vegetables and fruits and stuff.
Yeah. That
I feel like that's
right?
going to make for
Orange
a terrible
strawberry
bedtime story. It'd
Like,
be
I
fun
think
to tell it.
this is the most
But-
metal caterpillar, I would argue, I think.
I think if there were an award, I think we can give that award right now. Most metal caterpillar.
Yeah.
Yes.
The bone collector. Which is funny because no insects don't have bones, so I think it's very funny they called it that, but it's good. It sounds cool.
It makes sense.
Sure.
I like it. I'm a fan. I love this. Oh my gosh. So Blair, if you do need to head out, or if you want to stay, like it's your choice.
Up
It
to
is
you.
time. It's up to you. Justin's got some great news for us right now.
Good news, everybody. Okay. Oh, this not going to actually. Oh, this might not be. Yeah, I looked ahead. It's not great news. Okay. Stanford University researchers. They tested one antibiotic on human gut bacteria. They had 60 healthy adults that received ciprofloxacin, something.
Really?
Anyway, antibiotic for 5 weeks. Ciprofloxacin, twice daily over 5 days.
Cipro.
And then over 20-week period, they collected stool samples. They did genomic analysis sort of before and after. They constructed 5,665 genomes representing bacteria from the gut and identified 2.3 million different genetic variations. Among these, 513 populations exhibited a selective sweep, meaning there was a similar genetic change that took place in a GYRA, a gene associated with fluoroquinolone resistance. Okay. So what this means is, and this once established, it persisted for the duration of the study. They think it could have gone up, which was 10 weeks, and they think they think it could have gone on quite a bit longer. What's interesting about this, of course, is these are taking place in bacterial populations that are not the target of the antibiotic. However, they're gaining resistance to the antibiotic. And then, of course, the potential issue is, Kiki?
Antibiotic resistance, and we don't have defenses. And
horizontal gene transfer back to the pathogens. So these are the okay. So now the targeted whatever the bad thing that was in here, like the bacteria that you're trying to get rid of, they die off, and you did the full course of the antibiotic, so it's fine. You killed off everything that it was targeting, so they can't build a resistance, and they won't be back next time with stronger, better, fiercer. However, because the resistance persisted in the off-target bacteria, was developed in these off-target bacteria even, because it wasn't there before and they shifted so they were more resistant to it. That means that further down the line, as pathogens are reintroduced, if there's any lysing, and this happens with bacteria, some DNA gets mooshed around in there and it gets taken up and incorporated.
Persists.
And they have like both shown that just one, a short-term dose of the antibiotic generated this persistent antibiotic resistant gene in the off-target bacteria, means that those genes are now available to the next pathogen that comes in through a horizontal gene transfer. So it just gives us, I think, it's not a way that I've ever conceived of antibiotic resistance taking place. I thought it was, you knock down the population, some happen to be resistant, and if they're allowed to build back up, then they become a dominant population. But this scenario is, much more difficult to control. Because now
it's almost uncontrollable because it's not the bacteria that you're even looking at with your
it's not even the ones you're targeting.
But we've known that we've known horizontal gene transfer is a thing for a while, but
But the fact that it can happen outside of the duration of the antibiotic treatment to a different, and then it might not even be the same pathogen that you were targeting the first time that gains this through horizontal transfer later down the road. And anyway, I thought this was a really interesting study by Stanford. It's a pathway to antibiotic resistance that, aside from the horizontal that you can actually be training resistance by using antibiotics in a completely different way than I think we've been looking at. Was also interesting.
It allows the persistence, even though you're not it's not what you're looking at. You're not testing the right thing. Yeah, surprise, secret.
They could from this they were able then to back engineer it to a point where it was pretty much a correlative between the population size of the dominant bacteria and the amount of resistance that would be generated from it, basically. So you could also be sort of predictive if you were doing a before and after of every patient. You could sort of predict ahead of time how much of this resistance would be in place.
Transferred.
Yeah. Pretty wild.
Hopefully they're able to develop some predictive technologies that allow us to actually work for better therapies, right? And against resistance, or at least buffering our defenses. Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of defense,
back to me again.
Yeah. Speaking of defenses.
Oh God.
My internet is being weird. Hold on.
Defenses. Okay, so I don't know what Kiki's talking about. However, for this next study, this isn't a study. I've got two articles that both appeared in Science in this past week. Both of them are talking about the NIH. First article is NIH under siege. Siege? Details the dismantling and destroying of everything the National Institute of Health does. Roughly 2,500 NIH employees have been fired, forced into retirement. This is key leaders, veteran researchers, administrators have been reassigned, dismissed, or pressured to leave. Over 800 grants have been canceled, and new grants have been paused. The new leadership under Director J. Bhattacharya and the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. They are pivoting the department towards politically driven initiatives while eliminating diversity and inclusion programs. This is already taking place at the CDC. Back in February, researchers were ordered to retract or pause the publication of any research manuscript being considered by any medical or scientific journal to ensure that no forbidden terms would appear in the work. List of forbidden terms was provided by a CDC employee, included things like gender, transgender, pregnant person, pregnant people, LGBT, transsexual, non-binary, with a hyphen, non-binary, without a hyphen, assigned male at birth, assigned female at birth, biologically male, biologically female. One of the things that was also beyond that is any study that was diversity focused. This means like any study that breaks down the demographics of who they're looking at was potentially falling victim to this censorship. So it's pretty wild. Top scientists at NIH fear lasting damage to the U.S. biomedical research enterprise. Many young and foreign researchers are leaving. And the cuts are so deep that the NIH may not be able to even distribute the funds already congressionally approved that weren't filtered out, that weren't paused, or that, are being allowed to go forward because they don't have staff now. They're literally they stopped being able to buy the staples to staple pieces of paper together. It's like they're being starved. If
you take out the infrastructure, then you take out the capability, even though it's still following the letter of the law, right? Everything.
And again, you have ideologues who already believe, or at least in the Kennedy Jr. fella, already believes he knows the answers to a lot of things that the research has yet to be done on.
September. We're going to have answers in September.
And so we are likely to see. So I've reported on this a little bit before too. I cover a lot of science news for a side writing gig outside of this show, which is of course my main focus in life.
Always, yes.
And there was an initiative put forward a long time ago by I can't remember the name of the organization, but basically they're the executive branch arm of the People's Republic of China government that wants to connect ancient Chinese remedies as add-on therapies used with modern Western medicine. So what you get is a bunch of studies that find just that. And the problem is because the funding from an authoritarian government told you to go and find this, and then you did a study, it better find that, right? Like, how do you spend the authoritarian agenda money and not find the thing the authoritarian agenda wants you to find? So I've looked at those studies and I've torn those apart a few times. We talked about one on the show that was a concoction of several kinds of insects, but they didn't list them all even, and somehow it made it into a major American journal. Like, what are you even doing? But this is what we're, it couldn't happen here. I think we're about to see it. And I'm almost, because I'm a horrible human being, I'm almost excited to see those studies because they're going to be so poorly constructed that they're going to be pretty easy to take apart. But it's still going to be awful for, humanity. Second article also.
One interesting aspect to the publication arena is that because of lack of money and the time that in mental health of a lot of researchers right now, they are not reviewing papers. And so we're also going to have a peer review problem because we've had this building for a very long time that peer review needs to have people do this work without being paid, and it's just part of their job. But people have to take on that task. And now even more than before, people are not. So this is there will be a publication crisis sooner rather than later.
And to me, it's not a big deal as long as I have a job. And then I realize, well, if there's no research to write about.
Right? If there's no research,
what are we communicating? What do you mean it can affect me? Oh, wait, that's not right. I thought this was just,
We're not biased.
Hypothetical talk.
Tell me about your second study.
So it's not a study, it's another article. This one is also published in Science and also deals with the NIH and the NSF. Article outlines how the current administration has aggressively targeted U.S. government funding for misinformation research. Now you might be thinking to yourself, hey, why would the government be against research into misinformation? That doesn't sound like a thing a government would want. Researchers studying misinformation, whether it is related to vaccines or public health, have been having their grants abruptly ended and this is apparently written down somewhere, allegedly aiming to influence public opinion through, science and facts. Reality. Don't want to be influenced by that. At least 25 National Science Foundation misinformation-related grants have been confirmed terminated, with the actual total likely much higher. Social science research, which is usually, that is like you're not using up the expensive lab equipment. You don't have a whole lot of high-end expendables when you're doing the social science research. It's usually a lot of data crunching is what it is. Are getting cut. So this isn't like, oh, we gotta save money. Nothing to do with that. It says the cuts threaten to dominate the field, particularly for early career scientists. Some fear a lost generation of misinformation researchers in the U.S., with only private foundations left to possibly sustain the work. The administration frames misinformation research as biased against conservatives and therefore a threat to free speech. Experts warn the timing is dangerous. Misinformation is becoming more potent due to generative AI, things like deep fakes, and being able to put all that, as well as, some political agendas, slipping it into every other sentence. Yeah. Anyway, right now, so far, the public, which is all of you and us too, doesn't seem to have been making this a top issue. Kind of hard to pick one to make a top issue right now, but like this, the blatant obviousness of cutting misinformation funding as being so that you do not bias the free speech or influence the opinions of people is the most ridiculous doublespeak. I mean, like, doublespeak in Orwell's 1984 would be like, we don't want to put that in the book. That would be going too far. This would be too obvious. We need to make it a little less crazy. Anyway, but that was my just good news, everybody.
That's great news, everybody. Oh my goodness. And you do know that if this is something that you are interested in talking to your representatives about, whatever angle you may take, you can find ways, like the Union of Concerned Scientists has created an interface where you can find your elected officials and get the message across about how you feel about science, if that is something that is interesting to you. That is a new campaign that is just out this week, the Union of Concerned Scientists. So I'm going to move away from the politics kind of thing, kind of. I mean, I'm more into metaphor, but, you're asking questions about ourselves. How does this all work? How do we work? How does it all go? Researchers just publishing in the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences have a paper, Structure in Conversation, Evidence for the Vocabulary, Semantics, and Syntax of Prosody. Do you know what prosody is, Justin?
Is it writing? I don't know.
No. So prosody is the aspect of speech that's kind of like the melody. It's how the timing works, how your chord structure, like, I have a dream, like, are you in a major chord, like, or are you minor chord? Are you making a statement? Are you asking a question? It's the non-syntactic aspects of speech that lead to us understanding what people are saying, even though we might not have heard all the words. You might not have heard everything, but when somebody needs help, or when somebody is asking a question because of the intonation and the way all of that works. And this has been studied for years, and the great orators have applied prosody techniques, which are not exactly the same as music, which, it's like, okay, the drop, whatever.
So you're saying it's more than just cadence. It's also tonality involved in this as well.
Yeah. And so there are years, like one of the first like written essays is like hundreds of pages long from the 1400s. Like people have been talking and thinking about how we sound when we speak forever, but nobody's ever like put together classifications, and like what this research does, they claim, is create a dictionary. And so what they claim is that they've revealed a prosodic vocabulary of a few hundred patterns, and this is far fewer than the thousands of words that are in our vocabulary. But these patterns fulfill interactional and attitudinal functions. So these structures, when they follow certain others more frequently than chance, there are these particular structures that stand out in how we speak. And there's a difference between audiobooks, they found, and just normal speech. So having a conversation or even giving a speech, it's different than an audiobook. And what they're attempting to do, really, I mean, when it comes right down to it, what they're trying to do is figure out that behavioral expressive context of speech that is not apparent in the stuff we type and like the words that are there to help AI. So, when you ask your assistant device bot that's on the counter, when you say, no, I don't like that, like they just hear the words, no, I don't like that. And they don't understand that you are aggressively not liking it, or I don't know, which is like such a human, like, conflicted, right? The computer just hears, I don't know. And then they come back with, I don't know. Look at a web page. Here are 20 possible websites. And so what their goal is with this study and with this research, and this is out of Harvard and Cambridge, out of Harvard, they are really working to understand what they call prosodic patterns, to create a vocabulary, outline the properties, range of meanings, and incorporate it with logic. So of course it can be put into a database for large language models and natural language learning for every language on the planet. That's the end goal. So, I mean, in the end, maybe it'll be really Babelfish, and maybe there will be, the LLM in your ear that like interprets things actually correctly.
If we put this together with the AI personality capturing device we talked about last week, I mean, Blair could still be on the show right now.
I know.
We do a little deep fake. We got the personality AI that's intoning like Blair. which I don't know why I did it like a Valley Girl question.
Blair. Yeah.
Is that your Blair? I like my Blair better. I think I did a better one.
You probably did. I was not really trying. I was extra.
So it's really interesting, like, because it's so different culturally. I just spent 4 years in Denmark, where it is like the most monotone delivery of language.
But what are the things?
The cadences are fast and slow, but the tonality doesn't really change. Versus
American English, very tonal.
I almost cannot hear or follow. I almost cannot follow a thick Indian British accent combination, because I get so caught up in the melodic changes that they don't hit like what I expect. Like, I hear the British intonation of the words, and then I'm like expecting something with the what I would expect from the rest of the British prosa. What did you call it?
Prosody.
Prosody. I'm waiting for the rest of the prosody that matched that, and I'm getting the melodic, and I'm like, oh gosh, I just lost like the last 3 sentences because I was like, I was following not just the cadence, but I was following the melodic changes. Like, they were so different than what my ear expects.
Right, and you expect a particular British English prosody, but then because of the Indian influence, there's a difference in there.
They have the pronunciations are one thing, and then there's the tonality is still from
the emphasis.
Is the part that's hard to. It's not the pronunciation of words. It's not none of the articulations. It's just the tonality, and I've completely lost my comprehension.
Exactly, because you're waiting for it to the words to come together in a certain way, and even if somebody is like, "Hey," large pause, you're like, "Oh, what?" I want to sell you something. I want to sell you something. I want to sell you something. I don't know. I feel like actors are like the ultimate masters of prosody, because they're able to use the way that they express different things in a way that it can create different people. Who is the person you want to be, right? And so I don't know. I find this research very interesting. I think it's great that they're trying to finally, after over 600 years, put together some kind of real definitions of this stuff. But at the same time, I am a little concerned about the fact that when we start to delineate and define these things, that it takes away from like some of what's really happening. I don't know. It's a science thing. We do that.
Devin Reardon says if you listen to native Irish, it's more like a song. Yeah, I have a hard time with the Irish. Also, the Swedish. The Swedish are like Scandinavian language that I kind of understand. Slowed down, which should make it easier. But again, its tonality is so sing-songy up and down that it kind of throws me off.
Yeah. So one of the things that's really interesting about this study also is that they emphasized that the way that the speech were in historical articles, actually not this study, historical articles emphasize the way that prosody is not the same as music. And so previous work has found that in speech, even though you're expecting in music, certain chord arrangements and progressions and, a very particular style of Western music stuff, in speech, because it's in these more discrete little chunks and you're following the meaning and what the just previous thing that was said or how it was said and trying to understand the meaning of it, the speech prosody can be much more fluid and flexible and go a lot more places than music can. So altogether, I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
But I don't know. good for AI bots or not? I don't know.
Well, I mean, what is if we want to concern ourselves with it right now, like what is the end goal of replacing human language, speech, and communication? Like,
I mean, hopefully it would be to enhance human communication. Like, you know how many misunderstandings happen because people like send a text or an email and they don't use the right punctuation or they capitalize where they shouldn't.
That's like 100% what emojis are for right now, right? Like,
right.
Put the smiley face at the end so you can tell that the thing you just said was not a joke.
I'm not
or
attacking.
Was a joke, I mean?
Yeah, this is it's fine.
Like, sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah, and when you're dealing with LLMs and the way that they're interpreting and contextualizing and, averaging, basically, like probabilistically determining elements of speech, if they're not taking this stuff into account, it could lead things that are socially impactful in negative ways. So there's the good side of, hey, maybe we can actually make them work with us better. But then there's the scary side, which Blair should be here to talk about.
Oh.
No. We don't want them to replace us.
Yeah. I mean, they could replace a lot of people before I'm going to be too upset.
Yeah. But what
then
about
they're going to come for me. Then they'll come for me. And there'll be no one left to save me from the robot overlords, who I've always been for anyway. Like I'm so pro robot.
We've said that over and over again. So moving on from how humans communicate and prosody and how computers are getting involved in that, and databases and everything, let's talk about plants. Researchers publishing in the Proceedings of the National Academy
at the beginning
of Science
about screaming trees.
The screaming trees. That is an exaggeration. They're not screaming, but there is, when they're damaged, a shift in their vascular system that changes pressure. And so there are hydrodynamics at work that do change, not just that are expressed, that create vibrational signals. And this paper, thank goodness, doesn't get into the one plant damaged is like talking and screaming to every other plant in the ecosystem. They're not saying that, thank goodness. But what they're looking into are these other possibilities of wound signaling in plants. And so we've talked about mass movement of chemicals, of signals within the plants to be like, hey, other parts of the leaf or other parts of the plant produce more toxins. You don't want to be eaten by a deer. Or, these are the questions, though, of how does that occur? What's happening there? And one of the aspects that they have supported with their work is that when a plant is wounded and it cuts the cellular structure and creates a change in the system that carries water from place to place, that there is that creates a strong signal. Vibrations. It could be a sound if you could hear it, but most importantly is that this hydromechanical perturbation is not just the biting and the shaking of the leaf by a predator eating it or something that's going or fire or those caterpillars, that it can also be the leaf itself or the part of the plant itself that is signaling and creating extra vibration to propagate pressure changes that deform the cell structure, that also allow for extra transport of chemical signals within the organism. So within one organism that I don't know, they're screaming to themselves. So the question of when if a tree falls in a forest, does anyone hear? And it's basically it hears itself.
Is it well, Is it a form of wound healing, or like
not healing, but it is because there's a wound.
Like cutting
it is
off
warning,
circulation to the bleeding part. Yeah.
Right, but not just cutting off circulation, where we know in our own bodies, if there's a wound, our cells react and it cuts off the bleeding, right? And so our body stops that. But because there's so much turgor pressure in the leaves and the way that the actual organism is built, that when that is disrupted, that leads to a vibrational signal that can be felt, that like transfers through morphological changes. Cells get mushed in a vibrational way that impacts more than just that leaf. And it's kind of like inflammation maybe, but like it's a signal that gets things going for protection.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But now we're going to get to another interesting question. How do trees react to solar eclipses? Have you ever asked that question?
No.
I never had either.
Like, I feel like it's too short.
So this is the paper itself is actually really fascinating because it gets into some of the really interesting questions of bioelectrical potentials and activity in tree vascular systems, and additionally the kind of quantal aspects of photosynthesis and the way that plants are tuned into their environment and the way that they respond to things in ways that mobile organisms do not. So the hypothesis is that there is a thing called the electrome. Have we talked about this before? I don't think we talked.
Sounds cool.
It does. So, but instead of like a genome, it's the bioelectrical signal-ish that your body or any organism that has electrical activity puts out. So it's in their paper, they say it's an active, functional, electrical, biochemical process that originates within an organism used for communication or coordination within the organism's body. Biological systems are a subset of the electrome ensemble. So we've got action potentials. Plants, they've got a lot of really interesting electrical activity also. We don't talk about it all the time, but plants are like these slow-moving organisms where we're fast. So they don't have fast action potentials, but they have electrical transmission. They have behaviors that are bioelectrically stimulated. And so these researchers went to ask, okay, do these spruce trees that we're going to look at, do they have a sensitive bioelectrical change to solar eclipse? And does the age of the tree change how it impacts stuff? And so they didn't look at a lot of trees. I think they need to look at more trees. But they used remote measurement to test trees and their bioelectric potential, and characterize what happened during a solar eclipse during in the Dolomites in a forested location, so northeastern Italy. And what they found is that, the trees actually, like, the way that their bioelectrical activity showed itself is that it changed. And it started changing really, really early. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, now that it's like high eclipse, now it's going to change. The tree activity was changing much, much earlier. And the trees in shade or in sun, different positions around different places. So, they're controlling for where they were, shade, sun, eventually you're in eclipse. Everybody's in eclipse. There's no shade or sun, right? And what they found is that they had differential bioelectric activity. And then during the eclipse and leading into it, they slowly came into synchronization so that they were all acting the same bioelectrically. Which kind of makes sense.
Then the question is, does this at all mimic what happens at sunset?
That's a very interesting question. And
because it's a slower process.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yes. Yeah. So the big question, though, that I think that they look at is not just the individual responses of the trees to the solar eclipse, but the fact that you have older trees, and the older trees adapted to the solar eclipse changes more quickly. So they all ended up kind of around the same place. But the younger trees were like, oh, this is new, whatever. And the older trees were like, I know what to do right now. And so the older trees adapted to the lower sunlight, the change in whatever was going on in the atmosphere. The older trees adapted more quickly. It doesn't mean that the older trees are like, hey, young trees, you should do this too. But older trees are also very rooted in the system. So there are questions that could be asked, but I think the most important aspect of this study is really looking at to see that there are these biochemical changes that are taking place not at an observably physical level, but at this level of like quantum theoretical physics, right? That this is stuff that's going on at a level that most of us don't think about. Like photosynthesis is a quantum process. Electrons take a path of least resistance. It is not predetermined. There are factors that are happening constantly related to how these immobile organisms are responding to their environment to survive and to make the most efficient decisions possible. It's not saying that the trees are quote unquote learning in the same way that we learn, but there is the sense that potentially with larger trunks, with more mass, with more cells and systems that have worked better over time, that maybe there's a predisposition for things to work. There was a study about muscle cells in mammals a little while ago that suggested that there's like a physical process that isn't related to the brain and the nervous system, but is actually potentially like this quote unquote learning in the cells themselves. And so, I see this as a just indication of the complexity of these organisms that are the source of so much on our planet that we're like, hey, move, whatever, photosynthesis, whatever.
And it's not just like they're more electrically active when they're in the sun.
Nope. No.
Okay.
They're not more electrically active when they're in the sun. It's just that they adapt more quickly than the younger plants, than the younger trees. And there seems to be an onset that is at a very early stage of the eclipse is what they, just the eclipse is what they looked at. But it was very sensitive, highly sensitive to these minor changes that aren't the kinds of things that we're normally aware of.
This is like annoying me.
What I'm trying to do is not get into like the woo talk of like trees communicating with each other and blah, blah, blah. They're not communicating with each other. There's this adaptation that is really amazing, but they could be communicating. I don't know, but go ahead.
I didn't go anywhere near that. What I was saying was I'm really annoyed with is that they didn't give us the side-by-side of this when it just gets dark. And they didn't give us the what if a big cloud rolls in on a sunny day? Like, Is it any different than an eclipse? Or are we talking about something that they see constantly as clouds pass over and create shadow? Like, does that start the same effect that you see when the blackout event is starting to take place? Like, there's so many like easy, low-hanging fruit questions that could have been combined with this to give a better idea of what's taking place. But I mean, I get it. You do one study, you look at one thing, you look at it right, and you move on. And there's probably 10 other studies that they can do.
Yeah, I don't think this is the only thing that they're, or only time that they're going to. I hope not. I hope this is the only thing. Oh wait,
I mean,
okay.
the comparative portion of it would be interesting.
Okay, here we go. Signal propagation is intended as a temporal process. We investigated whether a predictable event like the circadian cycle dictated by the daily rising and setting of the sun appears symmetric or ordinary when compared to a less frequent event such as a solar eclipse. We put these differences. It's clear how the daily solar cycle produces very symmetric processes with deviation in time smaller than 1. Not only was the deviation from temporal asymmetry more pronounced in the couple of older trees, the symmetry breaking process and accompanying increases in entropy described by the vertical offset from 0 concludes later than in couples with old and young trees. By comparing the time lags, we are able to trace a response to the eclipse ahead of 14 hours ahead from the actual occurrence of the event.
14 hours is pretty wild.
Ahead of the eclipse.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like before any darkening, they saw the effect.
Right. So the sun stuff, everybody's like day, night, blah, blah, blah. And they're just doing their normal thing. But yeah.
Forest fire.
It's just a cloud. Whatever.
Volcano.
Yeah. So there's a lot of questions opened up here. I find it fascinating. The researchers say the discovery underscores the critical importance of protecting older forests, which serve as pillars of ecosystem resilience by preserving and transmitting invaluable ecological knowledge. We now see the forest not as a mere collection of individuals, but an orchestra of phase-correlated plants.
Are you saying we see it for the trees?
The forest for the trees. Yeah.
I feel like that's where I was going.
One of this quote that they brought in from Schrodinger in the study of biological systems noted in What is Life, that the quote, regularities only on average emerging from statistical mechanisms are not enough to explain the enigmatic biological stability. He stressed that the classical physicist expectation to explain it solely on a statistical basis is far from being trivial. It's wrong. So it's something that I have like kind of thought about a lot, and I think Schrodinger put the words out. There's something about the statistical simplification of systems that that doesn't allow us to really see what's necessary or sufficient. Statistical methods might be necessary to explain for us, but they're not sufficient, not fully sufficient to give us a complete understanding of the complexity of these systems. And then when you get into like quantum stuff, then you're like, Carl Sagan didn't even know. Anyway, trees. They're more than a forest. Who knew?
The trees, I guess.
The trees knew all along. The trees have been like, hey, I'm right here. Hey.
Squirrels had some indication.
Have we done it?
I think we've reached the end of another show.
I think we have. Totally. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the show. I hope that you enjoyed all the ins and outs and ups and downs, over-unders, throughs. Fada, thank you for your help with social media and show notes. Gord, Arnlore, others, thank you for helping to maintain our chat rooms as places that are collegial respectful, compassionate. Everyone in the chat room, thank you for being those people and asking good questions and making great comments. I love reading all your comments. Rachel, thank you for editing the show. Identity4, thank you for recording the show. And to all of you who support us on Patreon, I have to say, thank you for supporting us on Patreon.
Could not do this without you.
Can't do it without you, right? Thank you too. I'm trying to go back and forth between different screens. Thank you to Robert W. Farley, Lauren Gifford, Dana Lewis, Eden Mundell, Alan Viola, Aaron Anathema, Arthur Kepler, Craig Potts, Mary Gertz, Teresa Smith, Richard Badge, Bob Coles, Kent Northcote, George Corris, PL Vera Zarb, John Ratnaswamy, Chris Wozniak, Vegard Shefstad, Jonathan Stiles, aka Don Stylo, Ali Coffin, Schubers, Sarah Forfar, Don Mundus, PIG, Stephen Allbrown, Daryl Myshak, Andrew Swanson, Frontis 104, Sky Luke, Paul Bronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, David E. Youngblood, Sean Clarence Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Steve Leisman, aka Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Richard Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Remy Day, G. Burton, Lattimore, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis Paul, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Sue Doster, Jason Oldstade Neighbor, Eric Knapp, Lon Makes, EO, Adam Mishkan, Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul D. Disney, Patrick Pecoraro, and Tony Steele. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. And if any of you are interested in joining us in the Patreon community and supporting TWIS, then you can head over to twis.org and click on that Patreon link. We'll be back next week.
Yes, 8 p.m. Pacific time, broadcasting live from our Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook channels. Hey, want to listen to us as a podcast? Just Google This Week in Science, wherever podcasts are found. And if you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well.
Or subscribe them.
Yeah, just subscribe them. For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes, links to stories will be available on our website, www.twis.org, where you will be forced to sign up for a newsletter.
No forcing. Oh my gosh. But you might get one if you sign up.
You won't. You won't. It's just a way so we can collect your data for the resistance.
What are we doing? Oh my god. Keep going.
Oh yeah. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes due in the night, please let us know on one of our social media accounts. Or you can send us a email. Just put TWIS, TWIS, somewhere in the subject line so that your email does not get spam filtered into a carcass-covered caterpillar in a spider's web in a small niche of Hawaii. It's where they go. It's where they go.
And I'm not there, so yeah, you're not. Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah. Anyway, we look forward to discussing science with you again next week. And remember, if you learned anything from the show,
it's all in your head.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer.
It's always those last little decibels at the very end. changing it down. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for another episode. It's amazing. Justin has just stepped off screen temporarily. He'll be back. He said, what? I'll be back. Ah! Yes. Time keeps on marching on, Ball Disney. And even though it was the end of the show, exactly, Pepsi Cola, it's not the end times, even though that is our new sponsor, End Times. Supporting TWIS. Wait, no. I don't understand. Are we supporting them or are they supporting... It's very confusing. Yeah, no, the robots didn't get him already. It's still a little way off before the robots can actually like take over things. But we got to keep our eyes out. But we love the robots. Robots are amazing. We just want to work with the robots. We're like huge fans. World Robot Domination is something that we've thought about for a very long time on TWIS. And it just is supposed to be done collaboratively, co-creationally, not authoritarianly. Hey, how's it going? You're back.
You imagined Robot Domination being non-authoritarian? What?
No, we've always like, hey, robots, you're awesome.
Yeah, but we just said that, as cover, I thought. At least that's how I meant it.
Justin,
Nonsense.
the robots the robots are not eating my face.
This is why like who was it in the chat room? Digital Nomad. Kept saying until they knock down, they kick in the doors. It's all fun and games still there or whatever. I'm going to be the one that goes. Someday, I'll just be disappeared, and people will be like, "What happened to Justin?" Oh, we don't know. We haven't heard anything. No, and then they're gonna be.
He has no internet.
They're gonna show that prison full of people with all the tattoos, and there'll be one guy without tattoos, like this, and way in the background, you'll be like, "Oh, there he is. We see him now. He's there. He went." Oh gosh.
Oh my goodness.
They're doing forced labor for lawyers. They're forcing because here's what's happened. Traditionally, big law firms donate some of their time, some sort of
right. But then they were fired because of
this is okay. They as a part of their gilded craft of whatever of law, they spend some time doing pro bono work, usually for the underserved, as a give back to the community sort of thing, that these large law firms do. The current administration wants to force them to do that pro bono work to defend them and police who are being accused of crimes. So the pro bono work usually works like, let's look for a case that we want to champion and select it and take it up. No, they say that thing that you were doing, we want you to do by law, by decree, forcibly. And then, of course, within hours of these announcements, they're getting sued because you're trying to do forced labor to lawyers. Like, of course you're going to immediately get sued. So, anyway, I think it might be, everything is ridiculous. Anyway, End Times sponsorship. We're still figuring out the fine details. They want to be paid in precious metal, or they only want to pay us in precious metals, I guess, is the thing.
I like precious metals.
Like, I get it, but I'm like, how do you spend precious metals? Like, it's totally ridiculous. So anyway, but they're a sponsor. We're still working out the details.
Yeah. No, I mean, Gollum. My precious. Precious. My precious.
We're gonna
The
have
precious
kits.
metals will be they'll be turned into rings for people who hide in caves.
We're gonna have there'll be kits. There's gonna be a surviving in a post-government America manual that you can use to survive the day-to-day push-pull of a lawless society. You know, anarchy, as some people would refer to it as. Also,
it's gonna be not the laws that you wanted.
And then there's also one section that covers not saying anything out loud, which I wish I had read before, but it's too late now. It's really going to be fun.
It's going to be super fun.
I mean,
like
we're basically
site.
So here's the actual good news. I'll give everybody the actual good news. All of the insanity that has taken place destroyed institutions, destroyed the economy, destroyed civil liberties, are all executive actions,
which are not laws.
They're not. Yeah, they're not
legal.
And some of them might not even be legal in the first place. But this is like the tough part when you have a rogue democracy is that it's not really, this one at least, is not built, apparently, with enough safeguards. So those need to get added in. But the other part is all of it can go away with one election. Now that election's a long ways off. So you think, oh, but wait till we survive. Actually, it's just in a couple of years. That's the election that's going to take the Congress and the Senate, shift them in a different direction. They're going to slow down and be able to counter.
If we can get there. Yeah, I mean, we just need to get there.
Yeah, if we can get there. People, like, it's like really ridiculous that we're this is that whole like it can't happen here thing that I think a lot of people are, coming to terms with. And then you also have to like really, really understand that there is an alternate reality in America where all of these things that are happening make perfect sense to the people who are supporting it. Because they have had an entirely different version of reality built around them. And they've got a long, like, our road is really pretty short. That's the interesting
question, though, right? Like, that's the, we're sitting here talking, and through the years, it's like, we've got a channel with people. We've got a family. We've got, it's like, we're all here for science, and right? But people through the years have been like, I don't agree with your political views. I don't agree with that, whatever. And I'm open to talking about, like, we've said things out loud, but it's not that we're telling people ever that that's the way it is, right? Everything that we do is about increasing curiosity, asking questions, and trying to get people to dig into what they're looking at. And now we're hitting a point where people who don't watch our show and haven't been really asked to question stuff are suddenly going to be hurting, and they're going to either have to dig into this is the thing that has to happen for America to be great, or this is actually really hurting us and I don't like it. Why don't I like it? What's happening? And there's going to be so many angry people because they've never had to deal with it before. But,
and I don't know that they're going to get there.
And I'm compassionate to everyone.
This is my point, is that alternate reality has shifted so far away from where the rest of the entire world is taking place. Our road back, as dire as things seem now, can be an election away. Order can be restored.
It's like one
election. Rationality can be restored. Institutions can be rebuilt, refunded. We can fix all the things, and we can have the world back like that.
But I want to emphasize that it's not just the executive office. It is our representatives, Congress, Senate, House of Representatives. Like that's
we're talking 2 years.
Yes, but that is the thing that like that's the one that matters, right? Like,
but my point,
because Congress has been gridlocked and able to control stuff. They've held the line to allow this to happen. So that's the issue.
Yeah, but again,
I love our government. Everything's great.
That shift for a big percentage of the American people means that when normality is restored, it is going to be the enemies have destroyed America and are like, it's going to be like, that's the thing. They have a lot further to go. Because the rest of the world the reality is still going to be reality no matter who is in charge of the government. And I'm wondering how long it's going to take a good segment of the American population
Schumer
to rejoin
no, not saying anything.
The reality of the world. Like it's such a crazy thing. But they were, it's like as if they are in a cult, which I know has been thrown around so much, but it is living in an alternate reality that is, self-confirming and has all these built-in methods of maintaining compliance of thought. You don't have to go look too far. Like I've been off social media for 4 years. And I went back on.
And then you came back, and now you're like, blah, blah, blah.
Well, because I'm like, what am I seeing here? Like, none of this is like, people are like, I can't tell if it's, I'm still on that fence of like, do they believe this? Or are they helping propagate lies, which is like the evil version? Or are they dumb in believing it? Like, I can't tell for some of them. But what I see a lot of is utter propagation of propaganda verbiage. Like, I can't tell you how many times I saw while the tariff fiasco has been tanking the Wall Street, they're playing checkers while the rest of the world plays chess. That trope I saw 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
The world where vaccines are a government plot, that there's this deep state that like everything is othered and everyone is an enemy. And
everyone's an enemy. And now it's okay because in our country we're all enemies, right?
So now no matter what destruction takes place to the United States, I'm a big fan of the security of the country. I'm a Cold War kid. Of course I want a strong NSA and a Department of
Did you have to hide under desks? I had to hide under desks.
No, but we did know the friend who had the bunker. I was like, well, we'll go hang out at that house again tonight. But like you want like, and it's just see what's going on with like the Alabama. Oh my gosh, Alabama. Research was the number one funded work in the state. It was all cut. Do you know what it's being replaced by? It's already been being replaced. You know what it is?
No, they've been working on it. Yeah.
ICE training.
Yep.
The secret, not so secret police arm of Homeland Security that's being used to, trample the rights of Americans. But again, for the sane part of the country, we need an election to take back some power. And then everything should be fine. For the other group, they're in they're already in a civil war. Like they already have hatred for a list of others, a long list of grievances and outgroups that are responsible for their conditions problems.
And keeping them down and not helping and telling them what to do, and it's not okay. I understand.
don't know how they come back. I don't know how they come back. I don't know how you get to that condition, but I also don't know how you come back from it.
We all need to talk to our neighbors more. It needs to not be media. It needs to not be the big media channels. It needs to be one-on-one. It needs to be people talking to each other and really understanding why their neighbors are scared. Like why, not, getting into your local church, talking to people at the church. Like, I don't know. Hopefully we can, I am hoping that we can avoid quote unquote world robot domination.
Right.
As a metaphor.
But and I get that. And I get that. And I get that's what that's what we want.
That's what we want.
But the other side is being fueled by
fear,
civil war, enemies,
it's the dark side,
anger. Yeah. Like
he's watching Andor right now.
So anger victim triggered on every single subject.
Like Andor is like it's amazing.
I don't know what that
my gosh, the second season of Andor. Oh no! Also, what's the one I started watching recently? No. I watched Acolyte, the Star Wars, like the first, like supposed to be like the Jedi, blah blah blah. Acolyte was so good. Like, yeah.
I've been rewatching a 1980s Cold War British spy TV series called Sandbaggers.
The Sandbaggers. Oh, okay. I'll check that out.
Yeah, it's
I don't know.
It's brutal Cold War decisions being made by a small group of British agents, and it's
I got a book I'm reading. It's called Is it A Few Good Men? I think it's A Few Good Men, but it's basically the dudes who started the American like Secret Service like stuff, like all the CIA, but then they're like World War II, and then they're like suddenly they have open budget, and they're like ending up with I don't know, all sorts of nothing worked, and still they got money and everything was fine. But the book is amazing. It's very well written, not like praise, like it's very like everybody's like we didn't do great. But we're still doing that.
It's also funny because I'm watching this like again 1980s Cold War spy thing, and it's like there's a whole episode about a guy on the other side of the Berlin Wall who's got photographs of an airbase somewhere in Russia, and he's trying to smuggle it out, but then there's like anyway, it's high tension and people are getting hurt over this. In the modern era, in retrospect, it's like, we have like satellites that see everything. Like, why is it even a big deal? Can't hide anything. And it's like, but back then when it was like, I've got an aerial photograph of a thing that's somewhere that we haven't seen and we'd love to see it. And so now we have to like do spy stuff to get it. It's also kind of interesting in that way. Like, gosh.
Very interesting. Marshall and I were looking into a bunch of papers related to birdsong and the compression of data. As we do, but the compression of data into MP3s in a way that does not increase the file size and is indetectable. And it just it's like the least LSB, I think is something is like, I don't remember, but basically it like changes in an algorithmic way that's encrypted already. Like it changes one of the bits in a byte, and it's kind of like a mutation in the genome, but where somebody can read the mutations if they have the right encryption malware at the end, and like maybe this is the kind of thing like. The whole idea that an MP3 could hold this other information that somebody with the right program at the other end could like.
Oh yeah.
You can sent
like,
anywhere.
information anywhere.
Our
Patrick
podcast
Golden in the
is
chat room saying,
totally
we all
clean.
need lightsabers. Hey,
do.
you know, look, the only way to stop a bad guy
God.
with a lightsaber is a good guy with a lightsaber.
Just to be a good guy. No, really? Is that really? Is that really?
It's kind of what the Star Wars kind of tells you over and over again. The only way to stop a bad guy with a lightsaber is a good guy with a lightsaber. I'm sorry. NRA stole its message from Star Wars.
I know. They do go there, but like, you know, the big message is, hey, good guy, bad guy is very complicated. Like, bad guys think they're good. Good guys think they're bad. Like, no. Good guys think they're... No. Anyway, I'm confused. It's complicated.
It's basically if you
If
get
the
rid of the
Jedis
Jedi,
just
if you just
weren't
get rid of
like
the Jedi,
doing
then you'd
dogma,
have peace throughout
right?
the galaxy.
Right. The Federation would be totally fine. It's all the Jedi's fault.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
That's all what we're going through in America is what if this
What
this
if we
is
got rid of
this
science
is the Empire
today?
Strikes Back. We need the return. We need the return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
To hurry up and get here. I don't want to wait. I don't even
do
want to wait
that?
2 years. I don't even
It's
want to
not
wait 2 years for another
happening.
movie. But that's where we're at. We just saw Empire and we're like, Han is frozen. Oh no. And we're gonna have to wait at least 2 years for the
Which is
follow-up.
why you need you gotta watch the all the episodals. Like there's
I don't watch. I watch
great
ancient
stuff.
You know what I watched?
The
You know what I
whole
watched
universe is amazing.
before I watched the Sandbaggers? What was I looking at? I was looking at original Doctor Who. Going through and rewatching those. Yeah.
I think old stories have a place to tell us new things.
You know where I'm going to go next? I'm going to Columbo. I miss Columbo.
I love Columbo. Oh my god.
One more thing. Before I go,
Columbo.
I left my beagle in the car, so I got to go back out there.
Yeah.
But I'll be back. I got one more question.
One more question. Oh my
That's
god.
like that's like he's like the best
love Columbo.
best detective ever.
I hope we have lots of good detectives out there because that's, detectives, they work well in the system. They're observant and they figure out when to ask the right questions. And, people underestimate detectives a lot, actually, I think. It's like, oh, detective, whatever. But, detectives they're amazing.
I like a good detective story that doesn't involve guns.
Yeah,
Because
doesn't
that's always
need to.
like if you're watching somebody unravel a mystery and they're running around with a gun, it's just just do your cowboy stuff on something else.
So not
It's
old
just
but
so silly.
new. Have you seen The Residents?
I don't
do you
watch
have
anything
Netflix?
new. I have
Okay.
Netflix, but I haven't seen The
Okay.
Residents. I have.
It's like
Netflix.
The Clue. It's not The Clue. Clue and like old detective stuff. Like is
The Residents, huh? All right, I have my watching suggestion.
highly recommend The Residents.
All right.
Really enjoying it.
I'm almost done with Sandbaggers. It's
All
only
right.
3 seasons, I think. So
If you're gonna watch anything new, The Residents, I
The
think is right up.
Residents. I'll go check
Like
it out.
very like the script is great. Everything's great. Very good.
Okay.
Not like Star Wars at all. All right, everybody.
Oh, is that the murder in the White House?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't see that. Yeah, that was
Oh, you
hilarious.
did watch it. Okay.
Yeah,
It's really good.
I don't know if it's only like not if I don't know it's just one season or if it's half a season or what it is, but I did.
It might,
I did
it's
watch
one of those
some
things
that.
where maybe it'll be more, but like it's one season. It's super good.
Yeah, it was really good.
Cornelia Crumb.
I love the
I want to know
watching the crowd, like, giving the like
bird
how
watching
you
is
can-
just a metaphor.
how you can tell
She's not-
that
How do you
the,
bird
what is
watch
it,
at
the
night?
predator bird from the
Everything is specific, and then it's like falcon.
yeah.
I have, yeah. I'm not at the end of the season yet, but anyway, I'm loving it. So.
Oh, the Avengers. Yeah.
Oh,
You know what? That is
that
one
was a
I
good
have
one.
not. Saw that on. They have it on the Amazon Prime. I'll go check that out because now that I know I've already seen The Residents or some of it.
Yeah.
I will do that when I
The
have
Avengers.
time.
That's an old one. That's good. When you're not doing TWIS, of course. Hey world, Justin's really good at science writing and stuff like that. So if you're needing science writing, reach out to Justin. If you need somebody to strategize,
I don't know what to write about. Like they're canceling all the things that I write about.
I can do live stuff anyway.
I'm writing about
like
it's already starting to shift. Like I've noticed a lot of my the coverage I've been doing is on research in other countries. It's already starting to seem to be happening.
It's always been in other countries. You were just in another country before.
Oh yeah, and then this would have been the other country.
Yeah. Remember? we can think about that. Reinforcement's important. Hey, Justin. Say goodnight.
Mm-hmm. Good night, Justin. Say goodnight, Kiki.
Good night, Kiki. Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of This Week in Science, where we absolutely did not say things out loud that we should not have. Y'all are wonderful. Stay safe. Stay curious. Stay healthy. Measles and other vaccinations are very helpful. And stay lucky. We'll see you next week.